Okay, folks, it's time to sit down and listen. We're about to arrive in half an hour, and there's a lot to report. Jepson shouted from the front of the cabin, getting all our attention. There's food and water by the wall. If you're hungry, eat now. I still felt nauseous after waking up from hypersleep. I was disoriented, not knowing exactly where I was, and my head was spinning. Like never before, there was no way I was going to eat at that moment. I needed to focus all my attention on Jepson. You're all here because your skills have earned you a place. I know that the bigwigs told you that accepting this mission is like getting the damn golden ticket to tickle Wonka's balls. Let me tell you something, they didn't offer you this for no reason. Most of you aren't going to get out alive. We don't know what the hell we're getting into, and for each of you to survive, I need you to be alert. Like never before. Jepson was already on fire, spitting words as if they were bullets, while he shouted for all of us to hear him. I glanced around the cockpit and saw that there were 10 of us, total, all equipped and armed. See, I don't often come out of retirement, but when they approached me a few weeks ago, offering me basically what Jepson described, I couldn't say no. Sure, I've been doing pretty well as a freelance security guy lately, but considering all the work I've racked up with Uncle Sam, I figured they'd paid me enough to keep me quiet. I guess it just needed the right people to need my skills, just like these other fools here. We certainly fit the stereotype older men, with obvious military backgrounds, and most with scars. I imagine that until a few days ago none of you knew that space travel like this existed Star Trek style, but this is just the beginning of what you're going to find. We are currently en route to a space station known as the Outpost Styx. That place is where the elite of the elite live. Well protected, with all their money, away from the troubles and worries of the Earth. The Outpost Styx. It's the size of a small skyscraper, and has all the amenities needed to live for hundreds of years. These people are so rich that you don't even hear about them. They have the resources to disappear from the radar. They understand. In total, counting. The staff and the auxiliary engineers, there live about 200 people there. A man, leaning against the wall to my right, raised his hand. Jean gestured for him to speak with due respect. Sir, these people should already have first-class security with that much money. Jepson laughed and nodded. Of course. Yes, that's why they are offering such an absurd reward. A few months ago, all communication with them was completely cut off. There has been no sign of life since then, and we have no clues as to what could have happened. They sent the last message before everything went dark, but it doesn't make sense to me. It just said, "Don't recognize them. Find out what it means, and maybe you'll take home the grand prize." So the aliens caught the rich bastards. Joked another one of the guys, causing laughter amongst us. That's the thing we don't know. A supply ship arrived a couple months ago for a Ramada delivery, but nothing has been heard from them since then. Everything that comes here ends in complete radio silence. As soon as it steps into that outpost, Jepson explained, as he continued, speaking now taking into account our environment. We can't rely on conventional munitions. They have been provided with a new prototype weapon that fires small electrical bursts, powerful enough to paralyze most humans with a single contact. Use them, MOA nervous voice interrupted from the cockpit, echoing through the speaker. You guys are going to want to see this. Sorry for interrupting, Jepson. But it's important. The shutters on the window to my right began to open, revealing the vacuum of space separated from us by a thick plastic designed to withstand the complete lack of atmosphere in the distance. The sun shone, offering warmth and light to an entire solar system. My mind, however, could only imagine. Sitting in a cabin in the earth, wasting my days in tranquility, away from all this. Soon I wished the air would catch in my throat, as I saw the problem pass quickly beside our window. A girl, probably no more than 15, floated aimlessly through the cosmos, at the mercy of whatever force had pushed her into the cold, empty, her eyes open and frozen in an expression of eternal panic, stared motionless ahead. "Jesus is fine," cursed Jepson. Beyond our ship, in the direction from where the girl was floating in orbit, a small structure of elegant design was Stick the Outpost, that showed huge empty windows with no signs of life inside. Jepson spoke again. "In summary, we are here to find out what the hell happened. Rescue the survivors and return home. Understood, friends?" A general murmur of agreement ran through the group. We all continued to stare at the girl floating beyond us. Trapped in the strange scene was creepy. She moved quickly, but everything about her was motionless. Not a single strand of hair stirred as she slid under the sunlight that pierced the void. A chill ran down my spine, making me visibly shudder, which caused the men around me to laugh. "There is more." The voice came back over the radio as everyone did away. It was hard to make them out against the vast darkness of space. But eventually I counted about 10 or 11 bodies floating around sticks, as if they were waiting to be let in. "Well, this is so fucking creepy," muttered a soldier next to me, a big guy with one of the worst brown hair dyes I have ever seen in my life. He grunted in agreement as the pilot began to give us instructions to disembark. I remained silent, lined up behind the others, waiting to exit the airlock. Once we connected, the bolt-action rifle they had given us was light, almost too light. I felt like I was entering an unknown hell, armed with a gun nerf. "Very well, gentlemen," said Jepson again, looking at us one by one, as he positioned himself in front of the airlock. "If you see anything suspicious, let the others know. Don't react in a way that draws attention. We don't know exactly what happened here, but it's those bodies out there. They are not a sign of welcome. Come back alive, sir." We all 10 responded in unison, as if the programming of the old days was still on Music Us. This was nothing like the deserts of the Middle East, thank God, although at this point a little warm sun would be a real blessing. Silvito brought me out of my thoughts and brought me back to music. Present the hatch in front of us opened, revealing a brightly lit hallway. The white panels were almost blinding, and the LED lights flickered immediately, giving me a headache with their constant buzzing. However, only the first 2-second hallways were lit beyond that. The darkness stretched out, swallowing the rest of the way. We all took a moment to reconcile ourselves with what we believed in before. Music entering, I had never felt a stillness like that of this place. Everything was silent, but it did not convey peace. There was something discordant, like when you know that the absence of any sound means trouble, as if someone was hiding so as not to be discovered. My stomach was already turned aware that we had gotten into something that was beyond us, even before advancing 3 meters into this damned place. But we had no choice. We had to keep moving slowly down the hallway, turning on the flashlights as the station grew darker and darker. Soon we reached a central atrium, a kind of plaza, huge, from which several paths led off. I could make out signs that indicated small businesses, restaurants, shops, and others that led to areas, spa, entertainment, and lodging. Administration, each path split into its own hallway, flanked by huge floor-to-ceiling windows, revealing the vast majesty of outer space. Jepson motioned for us to unfold. We're spread out on the floor, though not in a music-recognizable way. However, the worst was the stench permeated the air, as if we were enveloped in the very essence of death. We could feel the shadow of the Grim Reaper pressing down on him, and I saw a body on top of him. His eyes had been torn out, and the hands were still raised, as if they had tried to stop the vision of something terrifying. A scream broke the silence from the entertainment wing. Music. Before, in war zones, surrounded by bombs and gunfire, he never brought anything well. Jepson made a sign, and we all followed him into the entertainment wing, moving fast but silently. As we reached the center of the area, the questions only multiplied. A door to our right swung slowly, opening and closing, with creaking hinges. Jepson was the first to approach, placing a foot to stop the movement before peering in cautiously. He stopped dead and stepped back instantly. A moment later, I understood why an unmistakable stench emanated from inside. There was death in that room. Get out of here. A hoarse voice made us turn. Now behind us was a young man, probably about 20 years old, who began to scream louder. They are going to bring them back. They finally left me alone. Get out the soldiers' ravings. He approached cautiously, raising a hand to try to calm him. However, we all tightened our grip on our weapons. When the man suddenly stopped, his gaze flickered between us and something on the ceiling, apparently hidden in the ventilation ducts. Damn idiots, a bunch of damn idiots have returned. Only a few seconds passed before they tore him apart before our eyes. Apparently from inside, I saw his jaw being pulled down by something invisible, torn from his skull. As the tendons tore, as they stretched, blood gushed out as his screams grew louder, leaving us all paralyzed. A couple of guys raised their guns at him, but Jepson extended a hand to stop them in a matter of seconds. While they tore his jaw off, his body was stretched in all directions like in some zombie movie, where they tear someone apart until everyone gets their share. It didn't take long for him to die. "What the hell did that do?" a soldier whispered. The rest of us were thinking the same thing, but Jepson gave the order to move. We went back to the door we had entered through and headed to the center of the music station. There are about 10 bodies inside that door in the same situation Jepson mentioned as we walked, pointing to the door that kept swaying ominously. Anything that can do that is already high on our not-to-do list. But I didn't see anything, and you all responded with a negative, as if the wind had torn it apart. Another muttered, "It seemed like the ghosts were killing him," commented the man to my right. We were passing by a window when one of them stopped looking into the void that seemed to wait to swallow us. The darkness outside, it felt like a predator ready to pounce at the slightest mistake. More bodies floated out there, condemned to orbit the station. Eternally, by whatever had driven them out, the soldier who stopped watched squinting against the immensity of space, trying to discern something. "You saw those bodies, right?" he mentioned when I almost collided with him. "That one there. I think I saw him move, probably just the wind, moron. Let's get out of here," he replied. "Sten, a burly guy, pushing his way through. There's no wind in space." "Moron," replied Mullins, an older man, missing a couple of fingers. Come on, kid. No one's waving to you out there for a good reason. He's not waving, insisted the man at the window. He moved closer, almost leaning his hands against the glass, focusing on a particular body in the distance. I followed his line of vision hesitantly until movement became apparent. There was a woman floating in space. Her hair was tousled and frozen by the lack of gravity, and she was smiling at us. I could barely make her out. But the shadows of the distant sun and space debris created a smile that looked sinister. The biggest problem, as I noticed immediately, was that she was waving at us. There was no vacuum that could explain her movement. No way she could still be alive out there, dressed only in shorts and a t-shirt in infinite space. However, her right arm moved, pivoting at the elbow while her hand flapped frantically, waving at each other. I stood still, wishing I couldn't see her. There was only darkness where her eyes should be, and the only defining feature of her face was the row of teeth that stuck out from her macabre smile. I took a step back, advancing towards Jepson without looking back. Jepson, there's something out there," I mentioned, pointing to where the other soldier was still in front of the window. I saw him raise a hand, and I felt my stomach sink. As I backed away even more suddenly, he began to shout, "Hey, she's alive. There's someone alive out there outside," he exclaimed as he waved back at the woman, gesturing for her to come closer. "Hey, can you hear me? We'll bring you back." From where I'm in the hallway, I can see her right on the other side of the window. There's no way anything human could close the gap between where she was and right outside. That quickly, much less while orbiting in space. But that was the least of it now, because she continues waving furiously, now banging on the window and yelling at us to help her. She breaks through the thick window glass like it's nothing and hugs him tightly. He looks shocked, but only has a few moments to process it before she grabs him, throwing him out through the solid window to be with her. As soon as he appears, he disappears, leaving him partially floating out of the window. The lower half of his body slides to the ground on our side, cut off by the solid wall between both of us. A pair of soldiers around him begin pounding on the window, trying to find a way to bring him back. But it's useless. The blood pouring from his severed torso boils as it collides with the vacuum of space, as irreparable damage already ravages his lungs and internal organs. All the water in his body suddenly begins to evaporate. Starting with the most exposed organs, there is barely time to register the fear in his eyes before it fades, sparks silently rotating in the void as its last images are burned into your brain, that will soon join the rest of your body, outside. Stop paying attention to them. A voice comes through a speaker above us, breaking the silence. "And you are going to die. And who the hell are you?" he yelled. "Stand at the ceiling, holding his gun as if he were going to shoot at nothing. Someone who has survived here longer than you." The voice replied, "Come see me in administration, and I will tell you what happened here. Don't pay attention to them." On the way the intercom went off, leaving us in silence. The voice was definitely a woman's, but other than that I couldn't identify anything. We all stood for a moment, looking at Jepson. The senior mission officer shook his head, sighing. He was about to say, "Turn around and get out of here." He mentioned looking at everyone. We were unfortunately told to rescue any survivors who might be up here, and who, whatever it was, just got sorted out. "Let's admin if you're very chickens. I won't blame you, but get back to the ship. The last thing we need is another situation. Like gates back there, sir. We all answered, some more unsure than others. I saw 3 of the remaining boys walking down the long hallway ahead back to the ship. A part of me wanted to do the same, but another part of me was screaming that I had to find out what the hell I had seen the woman in the window. She wasn't alive, that was for sure. But how she did it was like a ghost, walking through the wall of the station there, 1 second, and gone the next. The rest of you with me. Remember what the voice said about recognizing you. Jepson looked us in the eyes one by one, making sure we understood our number was down to 6. Music. Now a united team moving forward, and communication would be essential for survival. Mullins, Stens, Jepson, and 2 more boys named FR and Pierce. That was it? Yeah. Come on. Don't recognize him. Don't talk about him. We don't know what we're up against, and we're going to survive. However, we can rescue this person, and we're done here. Everyone nodded again, looking towards the administration and accommodation wing of the station. It was dark, with a small elevator at the end of the hall. As our only access, we filed in tight, like sardines in a small compartment, with no idea of what awaited us. Jepson was the last to enter, pressing the button on which read Admin, which made the doors close with a clink. The LED lights above us flickered, casting eerie shadows on the sleek white walls. 15 seconds after starting to go up, the elevator stopped, and the lights went out completely. C. Stens cursed, turning on his flashlight and moving it around the space. I saw him stand still for a moment, as the light reflected off the walls. Only a few seconds passed before the elevator lights came back on, and we resumed. "There are 7 of us," said Mullins of I Improvise, in a firm but emotion-laden voice. I blinked, adjusting to the light again, and did my best to watch, without moving or drawing attention from my spot in the back. On the left, I began to count. Sten Mullins, F.R. Jepson, Jesus Christ. We are not alone. Here there, right between Jepson and Pierce, was a small old woman. Her skin looked like it was about to tear. With the slightest effort, the dark veins were visible under atrophied muscles. Her gaunt face was framed by wild gray hair, and her eyes were missing, just like the woman floating outside the station. We stood motionless, avoiding acknowledging the presence of the newest member of the group, desperately trying to ignore her. As the elevator continued to rise, I saw it in the eyes of the others, too. Jepson looked like he was about to jump out of his skin, standing next to the old hag every second of this elevator ride, stretched out like years with the feeling that we would never be music-free. My breathing, despite all my efforts to keep her steady, it began to come out in shaky gasps. The narrow confines of the elevator were getting to me, and knowing death was lurking was not helping at all. "When the doors open, go out slowly and don't look back," Understood, Jepson said, and we all responded. Affirmatively, the witch stood there, whispering something low to be understood. The lights flickered again, casting eerie shadows over all of us. The elevator doors swung open with a clang, revealing a small white hallway. I felt the tension in my chest as I shuffled past. When it was my turn, doing my best not to brush against the old lady or pay attention to her. I don't know if I've ever felt more free than when I walked out of those doors. We continued down the hallway, not daring to look back at the elevator still open behind us. I heard it's like the doors were trying to close only to open again, as if something was holding them. It was the witch. She's coming out after us. Oh God, she could be right behind me right now, and I can't even confirm it without risking death. Take a deep breath. We're almost there. Have you seen my son? The voice came from right next to me. Raspy old woman, as if the speaker hadn't touched water in years. I swear if I didn't have enough discipline to keep my eyes forward, I would be fucking dead. Luckily for me, someone else didn't have the same resistance. Son of a bitch. Sten barely got the words out before the pulse of his gun was heard, barely grazing my shoulder as he passed. Flying, the idiot recognized her. The warm blood covered me as I tore him apart, with my head flying forward down the hallway in front of us. I shuddered as the jet of life force soaked my back, squinting to keep it from getting in my eyes. Sten was gone before his head touched the floor, with fear frozen in their disembodied eyes, now motionless in front of us. However, we kept moving forward. There wasn't much else to do. Just keep going down the hall towards the admin sign at the end. Several doors opened around us, revealing meeting rooms, conferences, or presentations that were now abandoned. Some seemed to have been left half-used with projectors still on, and computers on the tables, like a disturbing instant from a time just before the disaster. A small shadow crossed one of the doors as we passed, causing Pierce and Malin's reaction. Our numbers were reduced by 2 when something invisible slammed them against the doors on either side, tearing them away. They advanced, like hungry beasts. A child's laughter echoed in the surrounding rooms, causing me a shiver of pure terror. For an instant I felt my feet anchored to the floor before forcing myself to keep going, clawing desperately to escape deeper into this hell. Jepson Front and we were the only ones left. We moved down the hall, following the signs to the administration. The layout of the place was almost equine, with endless hallways twisting between rooms filled with horrors. I could feel that they knew we were. Here it was, as if the thin veil between us and these things was about to break, letting them through at any moment. Screams echoed through the halls, mixing with laughter and wails, trying to break us, forcing us to react. At the end of this labyrinth we found a small office. Its window was covered with what looked like aluminum foil and duct tape, like a scene straight out of the conspiracy theory stories of the 90s. The door opened. As we approached, a woman beckoned us from inside to enter. As we ran towards apparent safety, I could see her in more detail, a young woman probably around 25, with messy brown hair and thick glasses, stayed behind. As she threw us, we go desperately against the walls, looking for shelter, or what we hoped it would be. Shelter. The woman closed the door behind us. Music assessing it from security monitors flickered, showing images of different parts of the station. Almost all the screens showed mangled corpses, and in some areas there were piles of bodies slowly rotting. What the hell happened here? Jepson asked. Before she could say something, the woman let out a bitter laugh, sat at the table and stared at us, staring. Damn ghosts, killed everyone. What does it seem? She answered with a marked southern accent. Why the hell did they send you up here to die? Well, they sent us to rescue any survivors. I interrupted, taking a step forward. I guess it's you. The woman studied me up and down, pausing at my weapons, the knife in my belt and the rifle at my side. It was obvious she was calculating how to take them from me. If it were necessary, she was definitely a survivor. The only people in this worth rescuing died a long time ago. Long time, she replied. Do you even know where you are? Why were you sent here? As she spoke, I walked over to the window and ran my fingers along the long strips of duct tape and foil covering the Frame in one swift movement, she slapped my hand away. They like to look out the windows. Don't mess with that. And what the hell are those things? FR asked, slumping against the wall and closing his eyes, clearly exhausted. Ghosts are all I have. He shrugged again, sitting back down at the table and taking out a small notebook with a pen embedded in the spiral. He began to write a few words. Okay, I said, raising a hand. Let me ask you a few questions so I don't know how to piece this together. Who are you? My name is Shelley. Was one of your escort girls up here? She replied, looking at me over her notebook. How long have you been up here? Shelley? I asked, leaning against the wall. Since I was 8. She said it so casually, it took me by surprise. You were an escort girl at 8. My God. Front shook his head as Jepson looked like his eyes were going to pop out of their sockets. Oh, honey, that's not the worst they did up here 17 years. And I've seen too much by now. He was laughing despite our obvious horror. The people up here didn't see themselves as just people. They were gods, richer than you can imagine. But that wasn't enough for them. So you've been here 17 years. When did all this start? I asked, struggling to stay focused and try to regain some sanity. My sympathy for those who lived here was already practically non-existent, but not now. Now I just want to find a way to get back to Earth, alive. The first ones started a year ago. Some of the older residents were talking about people that wasn't there. Then they started appearing to more and more people all over the station. Every time someone noticed one of them, it was the end, dead on the spot. Shelley rambled on. Now I must say, it's nice to have real people again to talk to. I was going crazy here. Alone anyway. Yeah, people started dying when they noticed those damn things. Even floating outside the station, there were a lot of bodies outside the station, floating in space. All were they? Ghosts? Far? Asked, breaking his silence. Honey, no. Most of them were they living people at some point. Look, when someone gets torn apart by those apparitions, the ones nearby kind of start losing their minds. They started throwing people out the airlock like it was a sacrifice to save their own asses, though it didn't work. Shelley answered, laughing again. No, most of them realized. Right away, we were all doomed. It was just a matter of who could pretend best not to see anything. They also called for help. They brought in some experts. All this hurt my head for over a year, dealing with this, and no one thought to get out of here. Not that these people seemed especially rational, but still this screamed run away. If you want to live. She continued talking. They tried to do some sort of exorcism, a couple of little rituals to cleanse the station, and all that the poor bastards were torn to pieces, piece by piece. I think the ghosts made sure they stayed alive to feel the pain. It's the only time I've seen them last so long. She finished scribbling in her notebook and closed it again. Someone mentioned something about what caused it. No one had any idea, Jepson asked. Now none of us could agree. I know all the residents here were pretty crazy. So many of us thought hell had gotten tired of waiting. They went ahead and sent some of their victims to collect. You know, she said. Looking at the rest of us, it seemed as valid an explanation as any. Of course, it lets hell loose, and it's not easy to get it back under control, so almost everyone ended up being taken down, along with these people. How hell did you get it? Jepson asked, now looking directly at the woman she seemed to have been through hell. But somehow she was the only survivor we had in front of us. I was pretty good at going to other places, you know, up here. She pointed to her skull, tapping on the 100. When I see one of them, I start up like I would any other time, until they are no longer there, raw dissociation, but it works. It works. It's good to keep in mind, not that I haven't had my fair share of mind-body separation for some episodes of TT. However, she just smiled at us as if she wasn't aware of what had happened. The poor girl was obviously devastated by all the time she spent up here, but in the end she managed to save her life. So we just have to get back to the ship and go home. There are no more survivors, right? Jepson asked, looking her in the eyes and nodding as if she wanted her to say yes. None that I know of. No, sir, Shelley replied, shaking her head. The relief that ran through my body was something I maybe shouldn't be so proud of. But spending more time on this ship wasn't something I wanted in the slightest. Okay, whatever you need to take with you. Go ahead. Grab it. Let's get out of this mess. Jepson said, nodding and moving towards the door. Shelley stood up and put the notebook in a pocket of her pants. F.R. also stood up, making adjustments to his before realizing it was useless, taking it off. Shrugging at us, Jepson and I looked at each other before nodding, taking off our weapons as well, and leaving them on the table. If death comes for us, a taser isn't going to save us. Then let's go. As Jepson opened the door, almost walking straight into what was in front of her on the other side. It was a burly, bald man, although it was hard to tell with a large piece of his skull and skin missing on top. I don't know if it was just the initial reaction, or if he tried to grab on, but Jepson just let out a soft word before they pulled him apart. Something hurt her groin. His body collapsed. Maybe the spirit that did it was satisfied with his death, because it disappeared a few moments after the body collapsed. Son of a, I whispered, making a gesture to Front and Shelley to stay close as we entered the hallway. Shelley, if you can do that from here to somewhere else, hold on to my vest and follow me. Okay? They played us a dirty trick as we entered. I'll try, she murmured. I felt her slide, a finger along one of the straps of my bulletproof vest that was finally doing me some good here, upstairs. I honestly feel like laughing just thinking about how unprepared we are that we were. When we arrived with almost nothing going in our favor, the long and winding hallways were the same. As when we entered, I did everything possible to move forward with tunnel vision without paying attention to the laughter and screams coming from the rooms on both sides. From time to time the shadows snuck between the doors as if in a Scooby-Doo chase, trying to make me recognize them, almost running through us. Finally one got close. Too close. It pierced me when I passed between two doors that led to the elevator. I felt as if I had gotten into a freezer. Soaking us would be the last time I would be whole if I didn't. I felt his hand on my shoulder, squeezing me hard and pushing me gently forward. Barr was behind us, silently whispering to me to keep moving forward. Let's go. Slowly defrost the ice and get your body going. You just have to go through the elevator and return to the ship. I managed to get through, finding the way back to the elevator. After a few more minutes, the old woman witch from before was gone. Thank God. But Front and I knew what to expect, Shelley. If you see extra people in the elevator, don't mention it. Okay, I whispered, trying to look calm. The stars were shining in the huge windows surrounding us as we waited for the elevator doors to open. She just nodded. They like to ride elevators, I know was her only response. The bell rang opening to reveal two people already standing in the elevator waiting for us. One of them was shattered with their waist completely turned backwards, but standing at attention with their spine. Evidently the second looked like they had been pulled by the neck with a rope, as they fell hundreds of miles per hour, barely holding on, and grotesquely stretched. I could hear Front holding his breath a little, but I just looked straight ahead. Go somewhere else, anywhere else, and get in the damn elevator. I went in, breathing a stinking, putrid death as I passed by of them. Shelley followed me with distant eyes, and without seeing what we had in front of us. However FR struggled, he advanced rigidly, doing everything possible to ignore the shadows of violent ends that rose before us. But unable to process it in his terrified mind, he began to murmur a prayer under his breath. I expand to a god, somewhere on earth, or beyond in the heavens, that would save him. Despite everything, he managed to enter, and I managed to press the button of the central atrium. We have to stay calm, close our eyes, until the bell rings and we can get out of the elevator. There is no problem when I close my eyes. The white of the doors fades, and a dark emptiness takes over me. It is almost liberating, not to have to worry about what I might see when I open them again. Maybe I will keep them closed all the way back to the ship. Sorry, do you know when the train arrives? A voice in my ear brings me back to the present. My eyes remain closed. My breath, ragged in my throat, as I try to determine it is not a woman. It's definitely not. Shelley and FR wouldn't be asking something as dumb as this. Hell, the voice sounded like 1,000 broken nails scraping a gravel road, not like anyone else's alive. I should open my eyes just to make sure the others do, too. No, you won't know. Don't you dare open your eyes. It's those bastards who were waiting here trying to see if I recognize them. Even opening my eyes could be interpreted as a sign. Just keep my eyes closed, facing front. Listen to the doors. I walk as fast as I can down the hall without missing a beat. As I get out of the elevator, I open my eyes and see Shelley still holding on to my vest as Front flails against the wall through the darkness of the lobby. The central atrium comes into view, our last hurdle, before finally reaching the path home. It was empty before I try to keep my composure as best I can, but I feel like screaming just looking at the entrance to the atrium. It's a straight shot to get to the ship. Probably 200 bodies packed together, shoulder to shoulder, all wandering aimlessly. Soft whispers floated above the mindless crowd. By the time they reached us, they were all ghosts, and if we paid the slightest attention to any of them, we would join them, Frond. I think FR collapsed at the sight of so many. You can't blame him. The truth. There was everything. Men, women, children, old, young, all suffering from some hideous affliction that had put them here. Broken limbs, dismembered or barely attached to the original body, were common throughout the room. Some were missing a large part of their head, with brains spilling out. That was all I could see. From here I tried not to look, not to notice, not to make them notice, so they wouldn't pounce on me like predators hungry for food. Shelley's hand grabbed me again, his shoulder, his nails under his vest, as his anxiety increased before I realized Front pulled a knife from his belt and passed it across his eyes in quick slashes. I have to commend his dedication. But whatever I did, I started yelling at him. When I saw him effectively blind, he dropped the knife and raised his hands, advancing towards the crowd. All I could do was watch. He slowed down a little before reaching the crowd, like when you're worried about hitting a drop while swimming at the beach. Then he dove desperately, making his way through the sea of death. With his teeth clenched, he went through a few corpses before stopping, screaming as he went through another. Maybe it was the cold aura they gave off, just from what he felt being near them. in the elevator, but going through them shattered him. Despite not being able to see him, he began to scream with his hands extended forward, as if clinging to a distant shore to stop drowning. It was useless. The ghosts interpreted his movements as an acknowledgement, and the sea of death churned as everything lunged at him to tear away his reward. Blood sprayed the air as they opened his skull. They cracked it like an egg, and pulled on it from both sides to fight for control of his spine that stretched quickly. Front disappeared in moments, the pieces scattered to every corner of the atrium as the shadows of life began to retreat to their place of origin. Some disappeared, others stayed, while a few began to wander the atrium, now free of some of their brothers who were crowding them. I let out a deep sigh, turning her directly in the eyes to make sure she was with me. She nodded. I've done it before when you touch them. Although, well, it's not like passing through them. They shudder. It's like, you lived it. What happened to them? Well, either we do that, or we stay here and starve, I said, taking a deep breath. Freedom was so close, a light of this dark and full of death. All that stands between us and that ship is a sea of dead, and I'm going to cross it. I look at her, making a gesture with my head, which she returns to me. Time to leave. I know that if I close my eyes, they will find another way to attack me. I see them in front of me, dozens of them along the path to the ship, but there is no other way to dodge them. I take a deep breath and take the first step, one foot in front of the other, Shelley with a hand tight on my shoulder as I guide her towards the goal. I soon cross the first ghost without giving it importance as the cold takes over me. It is empty, and I feel a sudden emptiness in my chest when they hit me from the corner of my eye. I see them, a man of my age, standing. A huge hole had gone through his chest. I swear, I almost felt the wound in my own body. A huge burst of ammunition going through him to keep going. Each person that crossed added to that feeling. The sheer weight of existence became overwhelming, and I don't know how long I'd been crossing the Dead Sea. By now my dread was a physical weight, holding me down, making my steps drag like boulders with every muscle. Jerk, I feel so weak, like I might fall and die at any moment, a corpse in this ocean of ghosts. How easy would it be for me to turn back? Now just take a few steps back and rest in the elevator hallway. Try again later, see if the ghosts, music, dissipate. Or I could look one of them in the eyes. That would end it all pretty quickly, and make sure I wouldn't keep feeling that absolute hatred for life that had settled into the forefront of my thoughts. More visions hit me, mentally and physically. I was a woman beaten to death by someone I loved. A teenager hit head-on by a car. An older man dying of a heart attack in the middle of his office. The supervisor screaming while everyone chatters on the phones all around me. Boom, a shot to the head from an overeager hunter ends my life. At only 12, the water presses down on me from all sides, but my small limbs aren't developed enough to fight the strong hand holding me. 10 men hold me down. One knocks me into the void of death, while the others take advantage of each of the bodies I pass through, shows me exactly how they died, mired in tragedy and violence, while I feel every last bit of pain, rage and sorrow they felt at their music moment. I understand why they do it now, why here. I still have no idea about it, but I get it. When someone goes through all this violence on the way out, all you want is for someone to notice, say something, just one person to step in and stop what's happening, now that they're already dead. What's the point of noticing if it's not to instill rage? It was too late. Anyway, I'm a wife, beaten to death by a drunken husband, a child abandoned to her luck for negligent parents, an old man locked away in a care facility while dementia took over. Each life reinforced my feeling that it was better to give up. All the spirits closed in on me. Now, even as I looked ahead, trying desperately to purge my mind of everything around me, Shelley was still clinging to my shoulder. If I give up, she's going to be stuck here in the middle until the ship leaves or gets torn apart. The poor girl had already survived. Long enough she shouldn't have cut her life short. Because I was a chicken here, I pushed my way through, seeing ghosts on every side, pushing forward, trying desperately to get my attention for a second. I can swear they're coming down on me, desperate to catch the little attention I give them, and use it to tear me apart. Suddenly we're free no more. There are no ghosts, no more. The oppressive feeling of emptiness from moments before is still there. But eventually it slowly fades. We had crossed the river of the dead in our ferry back to the world of the dead alive. It shone brighter ahead. Some blinking lights told me we were close. I grabbed Shelley by the arm, pulling her along as I sped towards the airlock, where the ship was docked. We soon reached the hatch, knocking on it to let us in, whoever was still on board. After a moment it opens with a hiss, and two of the soldiers who had left stand on either side, with their guns ready to fire if necessary. The next few minutes are a blur, but I remember hitting the button to close the doors and yelling for the pilot to blow up the remaining soldiers. Asked me where the others were, but I told them we had to get out of here. Naturally, they didn't just take it, so I had to tell them everyone else was fucking dead, so the bastards would move. They sat here comfortably while I watched as I tore everyone apart, and they had the audacity to ask me if I was telling the truth. Luckily, they were more willing to believe Shelley, and she told them what our journey back was supposed to be when we finally left that damn place behind. The stick stand faded as I took flight back to Earth. Now the only survivor under our protection. I really don't care what awaits us on Earth right now. Whatever they want to give me for doing this isn't fucking enough, especially knowing the kind of people they sent us to rescue. Now God, who's gonna believe me about what happened here? It's not like they didn't count on that when they recruited us. A body floats past the window as I look out, staring at the sun far, far away. I notice him waving at me, smiling through rotten teeth and crumbling into the void of space. I don't think he's going to pay attention to it. Maybe if I ignore him, he won't follow us. Maybe he'll